Starting. Steph Ceretti, congratulations on your Academy Award nomination for
Thank
Best
you.
Visual Effects. You're welcome.
Thank you.
It's for the movie Doctor Strange. How did it feel when you got the news you'd been nominated?
Oh, it was very. I mean, it's always a surprise. I mean, you think that you're going to be nominated, but it's always good to have the confirmation. So it was very good. It felt good. You know, it's the second time after Guardians of the Galaxy, so suddenly it feels like it's not a mistake anymore. So it was nice, very nice.
Well, give us some insight into your experiences of going to the Oscars for Guardians of the Galaxy. What was that like?
Well, it was very. I mean, I knew nothing about the whole process and all the parties, obviously, and the people that you meet, and there's there's the luncheon that you go to, which is actually very fun because all the nominees are there, and there's no pressure about it because it's just everybody gathering and getting happy about it. So it's a very nice experience. And then you have different parties that you're invited to. You don't go to all of them. Obviously, you try to meet a few people, and it's funny because you always meet the same people that are also your competitors in the thing. So and you kind of get to meet these people and know them better, and really I mean, we know each other quite a bit in the VFX community because it's not such a big community, but it's always nice to meet more people. And then you go to before the Oscars, there's a very all the nominees are invited to a small dinner in their own branch, which is very nice actually, with very well-known people from the VFX community. It's a very nice dinner, and then you get to the Oscars, and that's the crazy thing. It's just like you go into the limo and you go to the red carpet, and everybody's taking pictures of you, even though they don't really look at you too much because you're just visual effects, but it's all right. And then you keep going, and then there's the show, and it's exciting, and then there's the announcement, and you don't win, and you're like, okay. Well, I don't win. I don't have to go and talk, which is actually good. But you wish you had, and then you spend a good night. It's a very nice experience. It's I think you're lucky to do it once in your lifetime. I'm lucky to be doing it another time, and it's very funny because some of my co-nominees have never done it, so now I go with them and they see the stuff, and it's fun to see them discover it as well.
You're the old pro shepherding the new.
I'm not the old pro. It's my second time, so it's funny.
You're getting there.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your work on Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced in creating visual effects for this film?
Well, I mean, the overall, I mean, the complexity of what we were trying to achieve in terms of the visual storytelling of the film. There's obviously, when we started working on the film with Scott, actually that was in September 2014. We started the first, meetings and things like that. It was a challenge visually. And how do we make sense of magic? How do we describe the magic in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Scott had that idea about that sequence that we did, which is called the Magical Mystery Tour, which is that little film in the film when Strange gets pushed outside of his body and goes through all these dimensions and all these things. So there was lots to figure out in terms of the everyday magic, which they do with the sparks and going through portals and all these things, and then the more advanced magic of deforming cities and then the time backward sequence in Hong Kong, and then the dark dimension, the look of the dark dimensions, all these things. It was so many things that we had to create and to figure out and do for the first time. The cloak of levitation. How do we do that? How do we make it interesting and not just another cloak or another cape? So all these things were challenging in terms of R&D. From a conceptual point of view, and then once we got these things going, it was how do we shoot it? How do we make it on a day-to-day shoot, and how do we gather all these elements? How do we work with the actors so that they understand what we're doing, and how do we get the best out of the performance to sell our effects? So it's all that process is very challenging on a film like this one, because it's things that no one has seen before, so how to explain it, how to show it, how do we create imagery before we shoot that helps everybody, the actors and all the other members of the crew understand what we're about to do.
Right. So then where do you start? Do you start with like pre-visualization to give an idea of where you're going? Give us some like step-by-step process.
Well, it's, we start with a script, Scott had a lot of visuals that he wanted us to look into and analyze, and also with Charlie Wood, the production designer, we spent 2-3 weeks initially just going for ideas and finding imagery that we could relate to the story that we had. Also, the story was being written, so we had a lot of back and forth between what we were finding in terms of visuals and the story and where to use them. So there was a lot of feedback loop between the writers and us in the visual side of things. So then we started doing a little bit of storyboards, but we figured out very quickly that storyboards were not really telling the story for us, because all our effects and environments were so dynamic by nature that we went into previs very early. So we had third floor with our previous supervisor Faraz and me coming in on board pretty early in November 2014, and we started doing sequences straight away, from script to previs. When we had to previs everything, just be very, very thorough about it. And previs was used as I would say, as an R&D concept tool as well. Lots of R&D concept work was done by the art department as well. They did a lot of concept for this world and the dimensions we were traveling to, and also the New York sequence. They came up with ideas. So it was kind of a collegial effort between everybody, trying to figure out how to channel information and looks and visuals within the previs that would become a very important tool for us to figure out, how to tell the story, but also how to shoot it.
How much of this stuff was practical and how much of it was computer generated?
Okay, well, so for London, what we did, we scouted that location that we liked because it had that kind of round quality to it, and we liked that. We started by shooting on the ground, everything that's happening on the ground as they meet, and there's the portal and they go into the mirror dimension is all happening in London. We shot on location. And then as soon as they go onto the spinning buildings and everything starts to collapse and the sequence starts to be more of a fight, we go into a digital environment. So we had to rebuild the entire street as a CG asset to be animated. We shot all these guys in a studio in Shepperton, in Longcross Studios, green screen stage. We had some sliding ground so that they could slide on things, kind of choreograph things physically so that the guys had to tumble and roll and fight and kind of, do a template of that building so they would jump on the edge of windows and all that stuff. So it was a mixture of stunt and effects work for the fight itself, but trying to make it work with what we would be doing in post in terms of animating the building.
Mm-hmm. And then you also create these, there's several sequences like that in the movie that
Mm-hmm.
they're so entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
So I guess there's this great collaboration between you and the director and the stunt coordinator to figure out all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's these kind of films are really a team effort, and we had to work very closely with the director, obviously, but also with all the departments, like stunts, special effects, who were doing special rigs for us, especially for the Magical Mystery Tour. They created a rig that, in which we could have Benedict and being spin and everything, and following the previous computer-driven rigs with computer-driven cameras and lighting. All these things had to be invented for the film and custom made. So it was a collaboration between, stunt and special effects and us and camera and lighting. Everybody's kind of involved into these special projects. The thing is, this film was a lot of special projects because every single shot had its very specific things. So every single shot we had to figure out a methodology to shoot it and to achieve what was in the previs and gather the elements.
Mm-hmm. And then you have these great trippy sequences where he enters
Mm-hmm.
into, I guess, the nether world or the outer world, or talk about designing those sequences and designing what that world was going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing is the dark dimension that you see at the end. It was always Scott's intention to recreate in a modern way what Steve Ditko had created for the comics in the 70s, you know, the very trippy, psychedelic kind of colors and environments and shapes of the environments. So we looked at that, you know, lots of references from the comics, and kind of looked at how do we translate that into a modern, you know, blockbuster environment. So it was tough, you know, trying to make sense of the colors and the psychedelic thing, and how do we make all that dynamic and constantly evolving and serve the story. We also looked at, for the Magical Mystery Tour, we looked at tons of things like 3D fractals, macro photography, tons of simulation work that we've seen throughout, you know, in the last 10 years, popping up from all sorts of 3D tests and things like that that we've been looking at and that we found interesting. We looked a lot at optical illusions as well, you know, mirrors, kaleidoscopes, all these things kind of mixed together to create these environments. There was a lot of work done by the art department in terms of getting some concept for each and every beat in the Magical Mystery Tour, and also in the Dark Dimension, the colors, you know, the shape of the planets and all these. It was just like a huge collaboration, and the vendors took it on board and created their own stuff as well. That's the thing with these films, and because you have preconceived ideas, but it keeps evolving and you keep trying to make it better and better. You know, everybody's kind of involved and there's ideas coming from everywhere, which is actually very, very exciting, because on these films specifically, I think everybody was super excited because there's no rules. So whatever is cool and whatever serves the story, we're going to grab. We're going to just go on it and just latch onto something and just develop it and push it. So I think it gave the opportunity for lots of the artists and everybody to be really involved into it. That was nice.
Right, absolutely. You mentioned the cape earlier and how that was a challenge. Yeah. Can you talk specifically about why it was a challenge? I mean, it seems like compared to everything else in the movie, it seems like it was such a simple thing.
Well, it was about finding the right level of animation, you know, just, first of all, it was about not just having a cloak or cape that was just a cloak or a cape, you know. It was, we talked about it very, you know, again, very early. We said, so what do we do with the cloak? It could be a character, you know, it could be something that brings another level to the story. And so we started this way, you know. That was the whole idea of, it was very close to the idea of the magic carpet, you know, or, you know, the idea of like the horse rider who gets a horse for the first time and he's going to work with it, and they don't understand each other very well at the beginning, but as they go through the adventures, they kind of get better at it, and at the end there's that symbiosis between the two, you know. So it was this idea, and then the stunts, actually, when we started doing stunt what we call stunt viz for the sequences, you know, putting in place and blocking the sequences, they also came up with ideas, you know, of him trying to get and grab something and getting stuck, and then we would pull Benedict with a wire and then take the wire out and just make it look as if the cape was, or the cloak was pulling him to showing something else. So all these things came from the principle that we had, you know, that we wanted it to be a character and to have this interaction between him and Doctor Strange and the cloak. And then we came up with lots of little gags and things like that. And then the gag of him crying and then the cloak kind of going onto his cheek. And so all these things came up organically throughout the script as we were trying to figure out that arc, that story arc between the two, you know. And from a technical point of view, it wasn't super complex. It was a little bit complex because we had to have a level of control on the animation, but then still make it look like it's a simulation. So there was a mixture of simulation and animation. And Framestore, we did actually Rocket on Guardians. They were in charge of the cloak for most of these moments. You know, all the vendors kind of had the cloak, but the key animation moments were done by Framestore, and they're very good at giving a character to a raccoon, obviously, and to a cloak as well. So it was a good experience for them.
All right. Well, Steph Ceretti, congratulations on your nomination, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. Yeah.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.